Welcome to Typically Unique Real Talk with your hosts, Kim and Carlos. Get ready to dive into the unexpected with us each week as we bring you fresh perspectives on a wide range of topics. From the typical to the very unique, we promise to surprise you every time. Join us for thought-provoking discussions, plenty of laughs, and a whole lot of entertainment. If you're ready, let's get into it. Welcome back to Typically Unique. I'm Kim Aponte, and I'm here with my husband, Carlos.
Hello.
So I have an obsession that I've been dying to talk about.
Let's do it.
So we have mentioned many times that we're true crime fans, and that has a pretty long history for us. With me, it started with podcasts when those came out, but you introduced me to the podcast when you discovered Serial. And did you look up what year that started?
2014.
2014, so 10 years.
10 years ago. Yep.
And he was listening to this show, and I'm like, what are you? I didn't know what a podcast was or anything. And I'm like, what are you listening to? And it was the first Serial season?
I think it was when podcasts first started coming out and being popular. And I had heard about this Serial. Somehow, I can't even remember how I heard about it, but I heard about this Serial, and it was a true crime, right? Mm-hmm, Someone supposedly wrongfully convicted, right. And there was a lot of, question about guilt or innocence, which right. I think puts us on the side, as we listen to some of these podcasts, we're like, or TV shows or whatever, right. I think they're guilty. I think they're not guilty. Here's the reasons why. So we kind of, have debates over those, and it's a good talking point, just something to chit chat about. But Serial was the first one for me, and yep. I think it took me a while to get you onto it, but once you did, you were like all in after.
Yeah, and then after that, I went on to iTunes and started looking for other types of shows like that, and oh my gosh, I have so many in my library, and I usually listen to them when I'm walking, and but so many of my friends are interested in those stories. And so in the fall of 2022, a murder happened in Idaho, and when the day the news broke, it was at the University of Idaho.
Right. And
I still listen to my podcast, but I started following people on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And it was, we had heard that there were 4 college students that were killed in their home and in the middle of the night. And just, that was it. Like, just this random killing.
So there was, that murder that happened. And I remember you bringing it to I saw it as well, but I remember you bringing it to my attention because I think you've had such a good college experience that, when you were in school and it was a carefree time and all that this was, how could innocence in something like this be lost? At least that's how I kind of felt from you. Like, wow, can you imagine that this happened? Plus, it fit neatly into our, true crime dramas.
Yeah, that's how I was drawn into it. And let me just clarify, like, I'm going to share information that I know, and the information that I know comes from all the TikTokers that I watch discussing the case, news reports, all the podcasts and the YouTubers. And I'm going to give a huge shout out to the Evil CJ show and Truth and Transparency. They have done a lot of coverage on this, but there's many creators on YouTube that have covered this, and it's important to honor the victims in this case. I'm not glorifying that at all. It is just, you just think about, oh my gosh, like how could this happen and who did this? And that's the big question, is who did it? So what happened was there are 4 students, and it's Kaylee Gonsalves, Maddie Mogan, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Krenodal, and they were students there at the university, all in sororities and fraternities, and the 3 girls all lived together in this house. And they had 2 other roommates, and it was an off-campus house. The day that this happened, there were a lot of events going on campus. There was a football game, and they had gone to that, and there was also the day before a big sorority dance that they had gone to. So there's a lot of information about their events and where they went that weekend. So it happened on a Saturday night, and that's when the football game was that day. And I know how my college experience was. I'm sure they were tailgating and just having the time of their lives. And then afterwards, later in the evening, going out. And we know that Kaylee and Maddie were at a local bar. And then they went to, they have a food truck that they called the Grub Truck. And they went there for food after a night out, and then they took a ride home, and they did like all the safety things that you would expect your child in college to do. They walked from the bar to the Grub Truck, and they had a guy with them, a friend, so they weren't alone. Xana and Ethan were at the fraternity, and then went home and were supposedly like watching a movie, in their house. And so that's what we know mostly of what happened during that day. And then we find out that at right before noon the next day, a 911 call went out that those 4 victims were found in their rooms, but that there were the 2 other roommates that lived in that house survived.
So it initially caught your attention, right? Because these were high school students. It was college students. It was a murder mystery. It was national news, right? Us here in Ohio don't typically hear about things that happen in Idaho. It's probably the first time I've ever heard of anything from Idaho, making it here. So it was national news. And one of the reasons it was national news, and you just touched on it, is, police weren't called to this scene until well after what had happened. So I think because we had heard initially that there were 2 survivors, what happened in the interim? Like, did they do it because they're in the house?
Well, so this is how it played out on the news.
Yeah.
So the news came out and just said that there were these killings, and that was it. Then you find out, I don't know how much time had passed, that the 911 call, so that they think it happened somewhere during the night. Mm-hmm. So this happens during the night in the house with 2 other people in the house. But the 911 call doesn't go out until right before noon the next day.
Yeah. And
so immediately, as soon as that was known, the true crime community was like, anybody was like, wait, what? Like, what? There's 2 people in that house, and it's like 8 hours later, the call goes in to 911. So this case, I know that I have there's a lot of followers that do follow true crime. If you do not know this case, the question, like, that was just the first. Like, what? that has come up in this case?
Well, that led to, so taking us back to that moment, because I remember, that led to speculation, right?
Yeah.
Because it was a 3-story house, you know, supposedly, because we heard a day or two after that the people that were unalived were on the so-called second and third floor or ground level second floor, and that maybe there were 2 people in the basement,
in the bottom floor,
on the bottom floor.
Those were the first reports.
Yeah,
they were in the bottom
no
floor.
idea what was happening upstairs, right? So that was, you know, we'll probably get into what happened later and how there's more clarity, but those are the first reports coming out that, hey, so it makes sense. Hey, I slept through all this. You know, I'm a college student. I'm going to sleep in until noon. So the call going out at noon means nothing because I heard nothing. I seen nothing. I know nothing. So, so what's the big deal? Right. So I think we were starting, well, I was immediately starting to be like, you know, there's no conspiracy here. They just, you know, the people who were left probably didn't do it. Someone came in. This happened unbeknownst to them. And then they slept in and boom, you know, you call when you call.
It's hard for me to backtrack to the very beginning because I am not kidding you. You're probably annoyed at how much I follow this case because it's just been fascinating to me. And like I said, I don't like to, you know, glorify what happened or anything. It's tragic, but it's to get to the truth. Like there are many people invested in finding out what really happened to these kids. And that is true. At the very beginning, it was just the 2 survivors were down in the, you know, the lower level. So of course they slept through it. They didn't hear anything. The call goes out. But I guess where it came into question is when we found out that one of them was on the second floor and also 2 of the victims were on the second floor. So then you're kind of like, okay, like you just start questioning, like you would have heard something and all of that. So.
And I think, you know, our reaction, more yours, but, you know, I did follow a little bit. I'm not as obsessed, but
he follows it because I tell him everything.
Yeah, and, you know, I overhear things and, you know, I watch TV shows and all that. But I think at the time, I think there was a lot of the students in the area were concerned. And I remember us talking about, you know, would you stay on campus or would you leave?
Right.
You know, and a lot of kids were like, I'm just out of here.
Yeah, there was a mass exodus. Yeah. And I think they just made everything online after that, of course, for sure. Because then they're wondering who did this, right? That's the big question.
Well, but then the police came out, you know, what, a couple days later or maybe a day later and was like, this was targeted. You know, don't worry, because, you know, you hate to mix true crime with your local economy, but all these kids leaving.
Well, yeah, their college doesn't want the kids to leave, right?
You know, all these kids leaving and local businesses, you know, and all this, and people are leaving. It's going to turn into a ghost town because there's some crazed serial killer out there targeting college students. I think the police were trying to put out something to, you know, quelch some of those fears. I think it ended up biting them a little bit that they kind of put that out there because they were probably making assumptions without even having a suspect.
Because it was right away.
Yeah,
it was right away.
Yeah.
They're like, this is targeted, but we don't know if the victims were targeted or the house. So that, and I'm like, how can the house be targeted? Like the house, you know, that, well, I guess I do know how the house could be targeted, but that will come later.
Yeah.
Just that first day,
Yeah.
hearing the news of this, the questions that go through your mind is, you know, how did they get in the house? Was the house locked? They have individual bedrooms in the house. Are those doors locked? You know, those kinds of questions that need to, once they have a suspect, you know, how does that fit into that?
So I think at the end of the day, because, I mean, you were involved in this pretty much at day one, and I know some folks kind of picked this story up right away and started podcasting about it or YouTubing about it and things like that. But for you, what was What was the hook for you? What made you really
Oh my gosh,
land on this one?
In my lifetime, I mean, I've heard of cases like this, like with Ted Bundy going into that sorority house, and but nothing like this has happened that I can think of in my life, in my time that I remember. And this is huge. It's horrific.
Yeah.
What's going on? Who did this? Especially if we know when we watch true crime stories, we're like, it's always the husband or it's the last person that saw them, right? That's 90% of cases solved right there. The significant other or the last person that saw them. And this isn't the case with this.
Right.
And it's very complicated, and lots of information and documents and body cam footage and local security camera footage have been released. There's people from the public that have gotten their hands on that stuff. So that's what makes it so intriguing and interesting about what really happened.
So this is probably, switching gears just a little bit, this podcast will be the moment or moments that we agree fully, right?
I think Carlos is a little afraid to talk about this with me because I get very upset because we just gave you the basics about this case just to introduce it. I really want to do kind of like a short series on this to share everything that I've learned just from listening. And I'm going to drop the names of a lot of the creators that I've listened to and gotten information from on our show notes. So, but there's conspiracy thoughts or some just things that don't check out, and I'll bring it to him, and he's always like, well, looking at it a different perspective, and I get a little heated because this is like my interest, but I promised him we would be able to talk about this, and I can see both sides. I do see both sides.
Yeah, and I like a conspiracy just like anybody else, and I think there are some very intriguing, facts about the case. There's a lot of intriguing conjecture, that, I've overheard people listen to some of her podcasts, that she listens to, or, watch some shows where somebody's like, these cops are buffoons, and because the cops are buffoons, this guy who's they ultimately have now has to be innocent. Those two things don't equate to me.
So this is where this podcast is headed. Well, this segment. So this is going to be kind of like our bonus episode, little mini series that I want to do, just because I love this. I want to talk about it. I want to share it with our audience. I think there's a lot of people out there that are also interested in it.
But I think every podcast that you've listened to, I've heard a community on one side of the issue.
No, that's not true.
Well, here we go. You see how it starts? What I've heard was a community on one side of the issue. Now, there are probably people in the chat saying, hey, what about this? And what about this? And, and all that. But what you hear from where I sit, because I can hear her podcast, she doesn't play them quietly. I hear them, it is a community banding together to find, different reasons why, or just inconsistencies, right? It doesn't have to be whether he's, this person is guilty or innocent, is why are there all these inconsistencies?
Exactly.
Why is all these things happening? It should be pretty straightforward, and
exactly.
And we should be able to come to some type of conclusion where everybody feels safe again and the right person's been convicted. But what I see is a lot of, we're right, these people are buffoons, how could they be so stupid? I mean, just harsh words that kind of take me back a little bit. And that's where I get frustrated. And not that this derived from Kim herself, but she'll use that language with me. And I'm like, wait a minute, time out. To use, because we talked about this example, I think last week, just because Mark Furman in the O.J. Simpson trial was a racist and a buffoon or, doesn't mean that O.J. Simpson didn't kill Nicole Brown, right, and Ron Goldman. Doesn't mean that didn't happen. Both things can be true, but it doesn't create innocence, that they didn't do it. They may find them not guilty, but it doesn't mean that both things didn't happen.
So what we're talking about is there is a suspect in custody in this case, if you didn't know that. So they do have a suspect. And I want to, on our next part, to share all the details of how this person came to be arrested. And since this person has been arrested, I get defensive over the conspiracy, the way you make it seem like, oh, it's a conspiracy, and harsh comments towards like law enforcement and things like that, and the buffoonery. It's because there's receipts. Like there's receipts.
So
one of the people I follow.
I agree with that 100%. And what I said was both can be true. That's where, this is where we miss each other. Both can be true. Have all the receipts you want. Both can be true.
Well, this is going to be an interesting little series that we're doing, but it's all about ultimately, and I think everybody just wants the right person arrested and to find out what happened to these kids. Like, I can't imagine. Like, I think of all the nights and all the stupid stuff I did in college, and these kids weren't being stupid. Mm-hmm. They were being very responsible, and to have that happen, it's tragic. It is truly tragic. And I find it interesting how the case is unfolding. Mm-hmm. To see who did this. So ultimately,
yeah. Let me say this: the people that Kim listens to, some of the ones she shouted out, and I guess we'll put, because she does all the editing, maybe put them on at the end or whatever. I'm glad that they're out there, and I'm glad that they're doing this, because maybe not for this case, because the cat got out of the bag on a lot of things early on, right? But I think it's putting people on notice, law enforcement, sure. Prosecutors, district attorneys, defense lawyers as well, that you aren't in your own little world here. There's people watching these things. And if you're going to speak out, make sure you have the facts. If you're going to make claims, have something to back that up. If you want to keep it from the public because you want the integrity of your case to, go to trial, then do that. But know that people are watching, and every word is going to be scrutinized. Right. Everything that's available to the public is going to be viewed, reviewed, and also scrutinized. So I love the fact that a lot of these folks are out there doing this. So I can morph to Kim's side on this a little bit, because I think what they're doing is kind of very, 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 very old school journalism, when people were trying to hold other people accountable.
That's what journalism should be.
What it should be, but it's faded away from that.
On mainstream media, which is what a lot of the creators will say too. And sure. I do think that this is a turning point with things like that.
I agree.
And I think a lot of institutions are going to learn some things the hard way, that we don't only rely on newspapers anymore and the channels on TV to get news from. Right. There are they call them cyber sleuths, and social media is playing such a huge role, and there's so many there's a lot of people, I think a huge part of our population that still isn't aware of that. Like they're not, and they're unfortunately going to find out the hard way. And a lot of things are, like to your point, are going to change from this, because people are watching and sharing, documenting. And it's big.
To affect change, you have to start somewhere, right? If the Idaho Police Department are buffoons and ultimately someone sues them for incompetency, right? Allegedly, right? Sues them for incompetency. It's only our tax dollars that are being, taken by that. It's not anything that's going to, no one's loses their job, in a sense, because, they just settle out of court. We pay the money. What's the big thing, right? I think where society is today, where there's more personal accountability for people in law enforcement, where they're just not being suspended with pay and 5 months later no one thinks about it and they're back on the job and just doing whatever. I think there's going to be more personal accountability, because a lot of these online people are kind of following after this is over.
Oh yeah.
Hey, what's so and so doing 6 months after the fact? And I think George Floyd was a big thing about that. We all know the one guy went to prison, but there were other people involved, and people were following them around and holding them still accountable. That why didn't you do anything? Right. And I think more of that is, it's a slippery slope.
Yes.
Because I think there's a big part of the country that wants people to be held accountable, that we could call woke, in whatever sense of the word that is. And then there's other part of the country that doesn't like that type of accountability, So there's a big split down the middle, of how people feel about, this kind of new age self-policing society that we live in. And
it's like calling things out.
Yeah, and you could say whatever you want about it, but there are people who like it, enjoy it. There are people who despise it and hate it, and there's a division here, because of this. So I think how people go about doing it and calling out, some of these things that weren't just mistakes, but outright doing something wrong, doing something intentionally wrong. That's where I think there's issues.
No one can come right out and say that, because you don't know, but you can certainly point out when things look a little suspicious.
For sure.
So that's all we're talking about. But yeah, this case has all of my attention, and it has been 2 years. Or a year? No, it'll be 2 years in November. So
about a year and a half.
Year and a half. Yep. Still no trial date. I'm going to share more details with you on another episode. And this is a crazy, wild ride. We're going to get into all of the online sleuthing, conspiracy theories, rabbit holes, a lot of the facts. So there's a lot of factual information that has been either leaked or just put out into the public. There's a lot of people that I have mad respect for that do FOIA requests and got their hands on like police cam, body cam footage, and got documents, and it's amazing what some people have done. So,
and my role here is to make sure that we just don't go off the absolutely this is conspiracy, and there was some alien that did this, that there's somebody committed this crime.
Yep.
Right. And I think at the end of the day, for the families, which you mentioned early on, for the families, the right person needs to be held accountable for what happened to their children, or sisters or friends or whatever. And, if we muddy the waters too much, are we letting somebody go that is guilty?
Right.
Or if we don't muddy the waters enough,
is an innocent person
being convicted, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
I think I'm here to strike some of that balance, but no, I think it's good to hear both sides. I've told this to Kim for years and years and years, and I could cite the first time I ever told her this, but I'm like, to fully understand an issue, you have to listen to both sides. And she's like, I'm not listening to the other side no matter what. I can't stand them. And I'm like, Kim, I get it. I know I have the same,
But
anger.
I did take that advice
Yes.
to heart, and I have done that. And
So
there
much
are
better.
2 channels. 2. I have 100 on this side and 2 on this side, but I do listen to them.
Yeah.
I do want to hear all the information, and really I want to see, why do they think that way?
Right.
Why? And I do that. I try to do that with everything, so I can at least see where they're coming from. And I just think that's a very well balanced. So I appreciate you pointing me, because I can be very hard headed.
Well, I was going to continue to say that even though that was a very hard line stance for her very early on when I first brought this to her attention, she's done a complete 180 on that. I think she still holds her values when something is very important to you.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I'm going to need extra convincing on this one because, I want to make sure women have rights, and don't take away my personal right, choice, or whatever it is, right? So you hold maybe stronger convictions, but for a lot of things, benign things that maybe don't affect us personally, like maybe in this case, you do seek that out. You do hear me when I say a different point of view.
I'll always listen, even if it is something I'm strongly convicted. I don't know how long I can stomach it for, but I'll.
It's not long,
see
trust
what
me.
their points are.
No, it's not long. She'll get
funny.
mad quickly at me when I push back a little bit, but yeah.
Okay, so if I piqued your interest in this case, definitely hope you'll follow along with this. Check out the channels that I will list for you. You can get all caught up and enjoy that rabbit hole dive with me, and then you'll understand a little bit better some of the things. But I'll try to explain everything the best I can. I'm just going off memory.
Yeah, and before we sign off, I think we want to maybe, as this case progresses, we got the typically unique real talk.
Right.
We're going to parallel that with this specific case and kind of catch it up to speed and maybe come to today.
Yeah.
So, and we've even talked about maybe even doing a live here and there. So I think
Yes.
we need about a handful more subscribers. So if you're seeing this and you haven't subscribed, please
Yes.
do, so we can go live and talk about it.
It means a lot to us if you could show us some support for that. Even just please hit the like button to let us know that you saw us, or hit the thumbs down button if you have that opinion. Be known. Let us know that you checked out the show, and definitely subscribing. Please subscribe if you're checking us out, and please subscribe.
Yeah, because we may go live with a current event that's just happening that night. Hey, let's get on and let's
Right.
have a community discussion about something like this. We may go live with special guests,
Yes.
that people we've talked to that we'd like to have on. But we'd like to maybe do something like that at a moment's notice, and if we have enough subscribers, we'd be able to do that.
Yes. Yep. And then we could all talk in real time, and when you're viewing, you're in the chat and you're able to chat and talk. This is what I enjoy about YouTube. I have my own little community of people that I know, and it's really nice,
Yep.
to have that. So, yep. Please subscribe, like.
So this was a good opening episode for Idaho 4. I think I tweaked you a little bit there, so I got you going, which is good. There's probably more of that to come, but
I think he just likes doing that.
yeah, a little bit. But I'm looking forward to the next episode.
Yes. Thanks for letting me talk about this. All right, everybody. I hope you'll join us back for the next one. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.